The amber glow of dawn spilled across the rugged Wyoming landscape as Amelia Blackett clutched her journals to her chest, stepping off the dusty stagecoach that had carried her to Twin Falls. The small settlement sat nestled in a valley where the Snake River split dramatically into twin cascades that gave the town its name. It was May 1878, and the 26-year-old linguist from Boston had traveled farther from civilization than she had ever imagined possible. "Miss, your trunks," called the driver, heaving down her weathered leather cases filled with recording equipment, notebooks, and the few personal belongings she had brought for what might be a year-long expedition. "Thank you," she replied, adjusting her spectacles and surveying the main street with its wooden boardwalks, hitching posts, and the unmistakable frontier mix of hope and hardship. Twin Falls was larger than she had expected a proper town, with a hotel, general store, saloon, and church, though nothing like the academic halls of Harvard, where she had studied under Professor Thornwell. "You must be the language lady," said a gruff voice behind her. Amelia turned to find a gray-haired woman with weathered skin and practical clothes. "I'm Martha Wilson. I run the boarding house. Got your telegram last month." Amelia smiled with relief. "Yes, I'm Amelia Blackett. Thank you for meeting me." "Well, can't have a city lady wandering around lost, can we? The professor's letter said you'd be needing a place for some time. Come along now." As they walked, Amelia became aware of curious stares from the townsfolk. A young woman traveling alone was unusual enough, but one who had come to record native languages was downright peculiar. "Is it far to the Shoshone settlement?" Amelia asked, trying to keep pace with Martha's brisk stride. Martha gave her a sideways glance. "About half a day's ride." "But you'll not be going alone, I expect. Not safe, and they don't take kindly to strangers these days." "I have permission from the Indian Agency," Amelia explained. "My work is to preserve their language before it's lost forever." Martha merely grunted in response, leading her to a tidy 2-story building at the edge of town. "This'll be your home for now. Hot water's ready if you want to wash up. Supper's at 6. Later that evening, Amelia unpacked her prized possession, a hand-cranked phonograph recorder, one of the newest models that Professor Thornwell had secured for her expedition. It was heavy and cumbersome, but it would capture what the written word could not: the sounds, cadence, and heart of a language. At supper, she met the other boarders, a schoolteacher, a widow who worked at the general store, and a rail company surveyor. Their conversation died when she explained her purpose in Twin Falls. "The Indians?" the schoolteacher, Miss Pendleton, asked with raised eyebrows. "But why would anyone want to preserve their tongues? Progress means learning English." Amelia set down her fork. "Every language contains unique ways of understanding the world. When a language dies, we lose knowledge that can never be recovered." "Sounds like Eastern thinking to me," the surveyor muttered. "You'll be wanting Samuel Richardson," the widow interjected. "He's the only one who deals with both worlds regular-like, trades with the Shoshone, speaks their language too." "Richardson?" Amelia asked, her interest piqued. "Half the folks call him a savage lover," Martha said bluntly. "Other half says he's the only reason we have peace. He runs the trading post north of town, but he's also got a small ranch. Strange man, keeps to himself mostly." The next morning, Amelia set out to find Samuel Richardson. The trading post was a sturdy log structure set back from the road, with a corral of horses to one side and stacks of furs and hides waiting to be shipped east. A bell jingled as she pushed open the door. Inside, the trading post was organized, chaos shelves stocked with everything from tools to textiles, barrels of flour and sugar, and hanging from the rafters, strings of dried herbs and plants she couldn't identify. "Hello," she called. A tall figure emerged from the back room, and Amelia found herself face to face with a man unlike any she had encountered in Boston's academic circles. He was perhaps 30, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a storm-dark sky. His brown hair was longer than fashion dictated, tied back at his neck, and while his clothes were frontier practical, a faded blue shirt, canvas pants, and worn boots, there was something in his bearing that suggested he didn't quite belong to either world. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who didn't use it often. "Mr. Richardson, I'm Amelia Blackett. I've come from Boston to record the Shoshone language, and I was told you might be able to assist me. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. Recording? Yes, I'm a linguist. I study languages. She straightened her posture, falling into the familiar pattern of defending her work. I have a phonograph device that can capture spoken words. The Bureau of Ethnology is funding expeditions to document native languages before they disappear. Disappear, he repeated, the word hanging between them. And why do you suppose they're disappearing, Miss Blackett? The challenge in his voice caught her off guard. Government policies, of course. The reservations, the boarding schools that forbid children from speaking their mother tongues. It's a tragedy, which is why this work is so important. Samuel Richardson studied her for a long moment. And after you've captured these words in your machine, what then? Will it stop the government from taking more land? Will it feed the children who are starving on the reservation? Heat rose in Amelia's cheeks. No, it won't, but future generations will know what was lost. The knowledge won't die completely. Knowledge without context is just noise, he said, then seemed to relent slightly. Who sent you to me? The widow at the boarding house, I don't know her name. She said you trade with the Shoshone and speak their language. He nodded slowly. Mrs. Collins, and yes, I do both those things. But that doesn't mean I can help you. Please, Amelia said, stepping forward. I came all this way. I understand your concerns, but this work is valuable. If the languages die with this generation, they're gone forever. Samuel sighed and leaned against the counter. The Shoshone aren't performing monkeys, Miss Blackett. They won't speak just because you've brought a machine to record them. I don't expect, and some things can't be recorded, he continued. Some words have no translation. They're bound to the land, to a way of life. That's precisely why context matters in my work, she insisted. I don't just want words and grammar. I want stories, songs, daily life. A customer entered the store, jingling the bell. Samuel straightened. Come back tomorrow, he told her, early. If you're serious about this work, I'll introduce you to someone, but I make no promises beyond that. Amelia nodded, recognizing dismissal. As she walked back to town, the weight of his skepticism followed her. Samuel Richardson wasn't what she had expected, not a typical frontiersman, nor an academic ally. He occupied some middle ground she couldn't quite place, and his challenge to the value of her work had struck deeper than she cared to admit. The next morning, Amelia rose before dawn, dressing carefully in her most practical clothes, a brown traveling skirt, sturdy boots, and a shirtwaist that would allow movement. She pinned her long chestnut hair in a simple knot and left her most delicate equipment behind, taking only a notebook and pencil. The trading post was already open when she arrived, though no customers were present. Samuel nodded at her entrance, then gestured to a pot of coffee on a small stove in the corner. You'll want that, he said. It's a long ride. Are we going to the Shoshone camp today? She asked, accepting a tin cup with surprising eagerness. No, Samuel replied. We're going to see my grandmother. Amelia frowned in confusion. Your grandmother, Elizabeth Many Horses, he said, watching for her reaction. She's Shoshone. My father was a trapper who actually married the chief's daughter, unlike most white men who pass through. Understanding dawned. You're half-Shoshone. I walk in both worlds, Miss Blackett. It's not always comfortable in either one. Outside, Samuel had saddled 2 horses, a sturdy palomino and a gentle-looking bay mare. Can you ride? He asked. Yes, Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. Her riding experience was limited to placid horses on Boston bridle paths, not Western trails. Samuel seemed to read her hesitation. Maple is steady. She won't give you any trouble. The ride took them away from town, following the Snake River upstream into increasingly wild country. Amelia found herself mesmerized by the landscape, the dramatic cliffs, the play of light on water, the vastness of the sky that seemed to wrap around them in all directions. It's beautiful, she said, breaking a long silence. It speaks if you learn to listen, Samuel replied, and she wasn't sure if he was being poetic or literal. After 2 hours, they came to a small cabin nestled in a grove of cottonwoods. Unlike the trading post, this place seemed to belong completely to the land around it. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney, and beds of plants some Amelia recognized as medicinal herbs surrounded the dwelling. An elderly woman emerged as they approached, her long silver braids contrasting with the vibrant red of her shawl. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Grandmother," Samuel called, dismounting and speaking a few words in Shoshone that Amelia couldn't understand. The old woman replied in the same language, her gaze fixed on Amelia with undisguised curiosity. "This is my grandmother, Elizabeth Many Horses," Samuel said in English. "Grandmother, this is Miss Amelia Blackett from Boston. She wants to record our language." Elizabeth stepped forward, studying Amelia with such intensity that she felt transparent. Then, unexpectedly, the woman smiled. "Come inside," she said in accented but clear English. "You have traveled far." The cabin's interior was a blend of world's traditional baskets and beadwork alongside iron cookware and wooden furniture. Elizabeth gestured for Amelia to sit at a small table while Samuel tended to the horses. "My grandson says you wish to catch words like butterflies," Elizabeth said, placing a cup of tea before Amelia. Amelia smiled at the metaphor. "In a way, I believe your language is precious and should be preserved." "Why?" The directness of the question made Amelia pause. "Because when a language dies, we lose a unique way of seeing the world. Your people have knowledge about this land, about plants and animals and stars that exists only in your words." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Words are alive, they carry breath. Your machines can catch the sound, but can they catch the breath?" "That's what I'm trying to learn," Amelia admitted. "How to record not just the words, but their meaning, their life." Samuel entered, ducking his head beneath the low door frame. He spoke to his grandmother in Shoshone, a rapid exchange that left Amelia wishing she could understand. "My grandmother will help you," Samuel finally said, "but she has conditions." "Of course," Amelia replied eagerly. "You must stay with her, not in town. You must learn some of our ways, not just our words, and you must understand that some things are not for recording." "I accept," Amelia said without hesitation, though the prospect of living in this remote cabin was daunting. "I will bring your things tomorrow," Samuel said. "For today, my grandmother will begin your education." What followed was unlike any linguistic work Amelia had ever done. Elizabeth showed her plants, explaining their names and uses, but insisting that Amelia touch them, smell them, sometimes taste them. They walked to the river, where Elizabeth demonstrated how certain words changed depending on the river's mood, fast or slow, clear or muddy. By sunset, Amelia's head was spinning with new sounds and concepts, but she felt she had learned more in one day than in weeks of formal study. "Tomorrow," Elizabeth said as Samuel prepared to leave, "you will learn to listen with more than ears." Over the following weeks, Amelia settled into a rhythm unlike anything she had known in Boston. She rose with the sun, helped Elizabeth with morning chores, and spent hours recording vocabulary, grammatical structures, and stories. Samuel visited every few days, bringing supplies and checking on their progress. Amelia discovered that Samuel was not merely a translator but a bridge between cultures. When she struggled to understand a concept, he found ways to explain that neither Elizabeth nor Amelia could have articulated alone. His initial skepticism seemed to soften as he witnessed her genuine respect for his grandmother's knowledge. One evening, as they sat outside the cabin watching the sunset paint the cliffs with golden light, Samuel asked, "Why did you really come here, Amelia?" "There are linguists working with tribes closer to Boston." She considered the question carefully. "I wanted to do something meaningful. At Harvard, I was always the exception, the woman they tolerated because Professor Thornwell insisted I had talent. I thought if I could prove myself with important field research." She trailed off. "But it's become more than that. Your grandmother has shown me that language isn't just an academic puzzle, it's alive." Samuel nodded. "When I was a boy, I hated having to choose between worlds. At the reservation school, they beat children for speaking Shoshone. In town, I was the half-breed. I thought I had to pick one identity and deny the other." "What changed?" she asked. "My grandmother. She told me I wasn't half of anything, I was double. I could see things others couldn't because I stood at the crossing place." He looked at her directly. "That's why I agreed to help you, even though I didn't trust your intentions at first. Your work exists at a crossing place too." The moment stretched between them, weighted with something Amelia wasn't ready to name. She found herself noticing the way the fading light caught in his dark hair, how his hands capable of such precise work rested easily on his knees. "I should check on grandmother," he said suddenly, standing. It's getting cool. As summer deepened into July, Amelia's notebooks filled with Shoshone vocabulary, grammar, and stories. Elizabeth proved to be a patient teacher, correcting Amelia's pronunciation with good humor and explaining cultural contexts that transformed simple words into complex ideas. This plant, Elizabeth said one day, holding a small yellow flower, we call it sun's tear, but the name holds the story of how coyotes stole fire, and when the sun wept in anger, these flowers grew where the tears fell. When you say the name, you are telling the story too. Amelia carefully transcribed both the word and the story, aware that her notebooks were becoming something far more meaningful than she had initially planned. They weren't just linguistic records, but cultural maps. Samuel's visits grew more frequent, and Amelia found herself watching for his arrival. Sometimes he brought news from town or letters that had arrived for her. Other times he simply came to help with repairs to the cabin or to spend time with his grandmother. Each visit left Amelia more aware of his presence, more attuned to the sound of his voice. During one visit in late July, Samuel brought a special gift, fresh peaches from a farmer's orchard south of Twin Falls. I thought you might be missing some Eastern comforts, he said, presenting the fruit to Amelia and Elizabeth. Elizabeth took hers with delight, but after Samuel handed Amelia a peach, their fingers brushed. The brief contact sent warmth spreading up her arm, and when she looked up, she found Samuel watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Elizabeth told stories of the stars, how they were ancient beings who had taken their places in the sky to guide the people below. Amelia recorded diligently, but she was acutely aware of Samuel sitting nearby, occasionally adding details or translating concepts that didn't easily cross between languages. When Elizabeth retired for the night, a companionable silence fell between Amelia and Samuel. The fire crackled, sending sparks toward the ceiling. I received a letter from Professor Thornwell today, Amelia said finally. He's pleased with my progress but wants me to return by October. Samuel nodded, his expression unreadable in the firelight. And will you return to Boston? The question hung in the air, weighted with implications neither of them had voiced. Amelia realized with a sudden clarity that she had been avoiding thoughts of departure. I don't know, she admitted. 3 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now. She looked around the cabin at the notebooks filled with her careful transcriptions, at the dried herbs hanging from the rafters. This place has changed me. Places don't change people, Samuel said quietly. They just reveal what was already there. Their gazes met across the fire, and Amelia felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the smoke. And what has this place revealed about me? Samuel smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his serious face. That you're braver than you think. That you can listen, truly listen, even to things that aren't spoken aloud. Amelia found herself wishing he would say more, wishing he would cross the space between them. Instead, he stood. It's late, he said. I should go, I'll be back in a few days. After he left, Amelia sat by the dying fire, her thoughts tumbling. She had come to Wyoming for professional advancement, to make her mark in a field dominated by men. She hadn't expected to find a sense of belonging in this wild place, or to feel such confusing emotions for a man who existed between worlds. August arrived with brutal heat that scorched the grasses and made the air shimmer. Amelia and Elizabeth worked in the early mornings and evenings, spending the hottest part of the day in the relative coolness of the cabin. Amelia's phonograph recordings had captured hours of Shoshone speech, Elizabeth's stories, songs, and descriptions of traditional life. One sweltering afternoon, while Elizabeth napped, Amelia sat outside in the shade of a cottonwood, transcribing notes. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, expecting to see Samuel. Instead, 3 riders approached, white men in dusty clothes with hard expressions. Amelia stood, suddenly aware of her isolation. Can I help you, gentlemen? The lead rider, a thick-necked man with a week's growth of beard, looked her up and down. Well, what do we have here? A white woman living with Indians. I'm a linguist conducting research, Amelia said firmly, though her heart raced. This is the home of Elizabeth Many Horses, a respected elder. Research, another rider scoffed. That what they call it now? We heard there was a white woman gone native, didn't believe it till now. Please state your business or leave, Amelia said, wishing Elizabeth would remain asleep inside. The leader dismounted, taking a step toward her. Our business? Just curious about a woman who'd rather live with savages than her own kind. Makes a man wonder what else she might prefer, that's. Uncivilized. Fear turned Amelia's blood cold, but she stood her ground. You're trespassing. I suggest you leave immediately, the man laughed. Trespassing on Indian land, that's rich. He took another step closer. Maybe we should take you back to town for your own safety. Wouldn't want anything to happen to a fine Boston lady. The cabin door opened, and Elizabeth emerged, her face impassive but her eyes alert with danger. You are not welcome here, she said in clear English. The second rider spat on the ground. Old woman, you don't decide who's welcome on American soil. This land has a longer memory than you, Elizabeth replied. It remembers who belongs. The first man's face darkened with anger. Listen here, the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked cut through the tension. Samuel stood at the edge of the clearing, his weapon trained steadily on the lead rider. Back away from them, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Richardson, the man growled. Should have known you'd be involved in this arrangement. These women are under my protection, Mercer, Samuel said. And you're on private property that was deeded to my father by the territorial governor himself. I have the papers to prove it. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats before Mercer backed toward his horse. You can't be everywhere at once, Richardson. Accidents happen in wild country. They do, Samuel agreed, not lowering his rifle, especially to men who threaten women. Mercer mounted his horse, his companions following suit. This isn't over, he said before they rode away. Only when the riders disappeared from sight did Samuel lower his weapon. Amelia realized she was trembling. Are you both all right? Samuel asked, crossing to them. Elizabeth nodded, but her usual composure seemed shaken. They will come back. Who were they? Amelia asked. Wade Mercer and his brothers, Samuel explained, his jaw tight with anger. They've been trying to claim land along the river, including parcels legally belonging to Shoshone families. They've already forced 3 families off their homesteads. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, the encounter having shattered her sense of security. What will they do? Samuel's expression was grim. Nothing tonight, but we can't leave you two alone here anymore. He turned to his grandmother. You should both come to my ranch. It's safer and I have men working there who can keep watch. Elizabeth shook her head. This is my home. I will not be chased from it like a rabbit from a burrow. Grandmother, no, Samuel, but Amelia should go with you. She is not safe here now. Amelia looked between them. I won't leave you alone, Elizabeth. The old woman smiled. You are brave but foolish. The spirits will protect me. I have lived too long to fear men like those, but you have more life ahead of you. In the end, they reached a compromise. Amelia would go to Samuel's ranch temporarily, while 2 of his Shoshone cousins would stay with Elizabeth. They packed quickly, Samuel helping Amelia carefully store her phonograph and notebooks. As they prepared to leave, Elizabeth took Amelia's hands. Remember what I taught you about listening. Some words speak louder in silence. The ride to Samuel's ranch took them north and west, away from the river. Unlike the wild terrain around Elizabeth's cabin, this land had been partially tamed fenced pastures for cattle and horses, fields of grass for hay, and at the center, a substantial house built of logs and stone. It's beautiful, Amelia said as they approached. The 2-story structure sat on a rise overlooking the valley, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. My father built the original cabin, Samuel explained. I've added to it over the years. Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable. Polished wooden floors, simple but well-crafted furniture, and large windows that captured the dramatic landscape. A Shoshone woman named Mary, who Samuel introduced as his father's cousin, managed the household and prepared meals. She showed Amelia to a pleasant bedroom overlooking the eastern hills. That evening, after a dinner of venison stew and fresh bread, Samuel and Amelia sat on the porch watching night settle over the land. The confrontation with Mercer had left Amelia shaken, but the security of Samuel's home was gradually calming her nerves. I'm sorry about what happened today, Samuel said. I should have warned you about Mercer and his kind. It's not your fault, Amelia replied. I've been naive, thinking my academic purpose would somehow protect me from the realities of this place. Samuel shook his head. No, you've been more clear-eyed than most who come west. You actually listened and learned. That's rare. I've loved every moment with your grandmother, Amelia said softly. She's taught me more than just language. She's shown me how words connect to everything: the land, the seasons, memory, belief. That's what I've been trying to explain since we met, Samuel said. Some words have no translation because they're not just words, they're entire worldviews. Amelia nodded. Like the Shoshone word for the time just before dawn. It doesn't just mean early morning, it contains the concept of possibility, of things being made new. Samuel looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. You've been listening well. Their conversation continued late into the night, ranging from linguistics to philosophy to personal histories. Amelia told him about growing up as the daughter of a widowed literature professor, about her battle to be admitted to Harvard's linguistics program, about her dreams of academic recognition. Samuel shared stories of his childhood summers with his Shoshone relatives, learning to hunt and track, winters in town where his father insisted he receive a formal education despite the prejudice he faced. My father believed I could have a foot in each world, Samuel said. After he died, I tried to fulfill that vision, but it's lonely at the crossroads sometimes. In the silver moonlight, Amelia studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet dignity in his bearing. It doesn't have to be, she said softly. Samuel turned to her, their faces close in the darkness. For a breathless moment, Amelia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. It's late, he said, his voice husky. We should get some rest. The next morning, Samuel took Amelia to see his operation. The ranch ran several hundred head of cattle, maintained a herd of quality horses, and employed a mix of white and Shoshone cowboys. Amelia was impressed by the easy cooperation among the men, a stark contrast to the tensions in town. They respect each other's skills, Samuel explained as they watched a young Shoshone man expertly rope a calf. Out here, what matters is if you can do the job, not where you come from. You've created something remarkable, Amelia said. Samuel shrugged. I just treat people fairly. It shouldn't be remarkable. They rode to the northern boundary of the ranch, where the land rose into rocky foothills. Samuel pointed out ancient petroglyphs carved into the cliff face. My ancestors recorded their stories in stone, he said. Different from your phonograph, but the same impulse to preserve memory beyond a single lifetime. Amelia dismounted to examine the carvings, more closely stylized figures of animals, hunters, and symbols she couldn't interpret. What do they say? This one tells of a great flood, Samuel explained, tracing his finger near a wavy line with figures above it. This group shows a time of plenty when the buffalo were abundant. Amelia's academic instinct took over. Have these been documented? They're historically significant. Samuel laughed, the sound warming something in Amelia's chest. Always the scholar. No, they haven't been officially documented. Few white people know they're here. You're showing me a secret, she realized. I'm showing you part of my history, he corrected. There's a difference. They spent the afternoon exploring the area, Samuel pointing out plants and animals and giving their Shoshone names. Amelia diligently recorded everything in her notebook, but she also found herself simply enjoying his company, the easy way he moved through the landscape, his quiet humor and deep knowledge. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they stopped to rest by a small spring bubbling from the rocks. The water was crystal clear and ice cold. This place is sacred to the Shoshone, Samuel said as Amelia cupped her hands to drink. The water is said to have healing properties. It's wonderful, Amelia said, feeling refreshed. She sat on a sun-warmed rock looking out over the valley below. I can see why this land means so much to your people. Samuel sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching. And now you understand why words like ownership don't translate properly. How can anyone own this? Amelia nodded slowly. In Boston, we have very clear ideas about property. Everything is mapped, measured, bought and sold, but here, she gestured at the vast landscape. It feels like the land owns us, not the other way around. That's it exactly, Samuel said, turning to look at her with an expression of surprise and pleasure. You do understand. The intensity of his gaze made Amelia's pulse quicken. She was suddenly very aware of their isolation, of the warm breeze playing with loose strands of her hair, of how close they were sitting. "Samuel," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a kiss as gentle as it was unexpected. Amelia froze momentarily, then responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, and Amelia felt as though something long dormant within her was awakening. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Samuel admitted, his voice rough. "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Because you're leaving." The simple statement fell between them like a stone. "Your work will end, and you'll go back to Boston where you belong." Amelia looked out over the valley, golden in the late afternoon light. "I'm not sure where I belong anymore." They rode back to the ranch, in a silence charged with unspoken possibilities. That evening, they sat before the fire in Samuel's study. The comfortable room lined with bookshelves that revealed his wide-ranging intellect, volumes on law, history, literature, and science sharing space with journals and ledgers. "My father believed education was the key to navigating between worlds," Samuel explained when he saw Amelia examining the collection. "He sent me to school in Denver for 2 years after my mother died." "Is that where you learned to run a business?" Samuel nodded. "That and hard experience." "The trading post was struggling when I returned. I had to learn quickly." "You've built something remarkable," Amelia said. "This ranch, the trading post, the respect you've earned from both communities." "Not everyone respects what I've built," Samuel said, his expression darkening. "Men like Mercer see me as a threat precisely because I've succeeded. They can't accept that someone with Shoshone blood could outthink them, outwork them." "What will you do about him?" Amelia asked. "For now, stay vigilant." "I've sent word to the territorial marshal about his threats, and I've warned the Shoshone families in the area to be on guard." He sighed. "Violence is always his first instinct, but I try to find other solutions." Amelia considered this. "In my academic world, conflicts are fought with words and ideas. I've never faced physical danger before today." "I'm sorry you had to experience that," Samuel said, reaching for her hand. "I should never have left you alone." His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. "You couldn't have known," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel moved closer, the firelight catching golden highlights in his dark hair. "Amelia," he said, her name like a question. She answered by leaning forward to kiss him, surprising herself with her boldness. This kiss was different from their first, more certain, more hungry. Samuel's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and Amelia felt herself responding with a passion she hadn't known she possessed. When they separated, both breathing hard, Samuel pressed his forehead against hers. "If you stay at the ranch much longer, people will talk," Amelia smiled. "They're already talking. Apparently I've gone native." Samuel laughed softly. "That's not the worst thing they could say." "No," she agreed, her hands still resting on his shoulders. "But I should return to your grandmother's cabin soon. My work isn't finished." "I'll take you back tomorrow," he promised. "But I'll be staying nearby. I'm not taking chances with your safety." The next day, they returned to Elizabeth's cabin to find her in good spirits, seemingly untroubled by the confrontation with Mercer. Samuel's cousins had maintained a constant watch, but there had been no sign of the brothers. Over the following weeks, Amelia fell into a new routine. She worked with Elizabeth during the days, continuing her recording and transcription. Samuel visited daily, sometimes staying overnight in a small lean-to he constructed near the cabin. In the evenings, they would often sit by the fire, talking for hours or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Amelia found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never expressed to anyone, and Samuel gradually revealed more of himself, his hopes for the ranch, his concerns for the Shoshone people as white settlement increased, his private dreams of a future that honored both sides of his heritage. One evening in late August, as they walked along the river in the golden light before sunset, Samuel stopped and turned to Amelia. "I've been thinking about what you said about belonging," he said, taking her hands in his. "When you first came here, I thought you were just another Easterner who would take what you wanted and leave. Now I know differently." Amelia squeezed his hands. "This place has changed me. You and Elizabeth have changed me." I don't want you to go back to Boston, Samuel said, his voice low and urgent. I know it's selfish. Your career, your work, they're important, but these past months. He trailed off, searching for words. Samuel, Amelia began, her heart racing. I love you, he said simply. I think I started falling in love with you that day at the trading post when you stood your ground and insisted your work mattered. I just didn't want to admit it. Joy surged through Amelia, bright and overwhelming. I love you too, she whispered. I've been fighting it because I didn't see how it could work, my life in Boston, yours here. We could find a way, Samuel said, drawing her closer. If you want to. Their kiss was full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Amelia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I need to finish my work, she said. I made a commitment to Professor Thornwell, to the Bureau, but when it's done. She looked up at him. Perhaps there's a place for a linguist in Wyoming. Samuel smiled, the happiness in his eyes making him look younger. Perhaps there's a place for this particular linguist beside a certain half-Shoshone rancher. Their return to the cabin was delayed by several more kisses and whispered plans for the future. When they finally arrived, they found Elizabeth sitting outside, watching the first stars appear. Grandmother, Samuel said in Shoshone, I have asked Amelia to stay. Elizabeth nodded, unsurprised. I have seen how you look at each other. The spirits approved this union long before you realized it yourselves. Amelia, understanding enough Shoshone now to follow the conversation, blushed. I need to complete my work first, she said, partly in English, partly in Shoshone. But then I want to stay if you'll have me as family. Elizabeth took Amelia's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You are already family. The words have been spoken in your hearts. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Samuel immediately pushed Amelia toward the cabin. Get inside, both of you. Lock the door. 3 riders emerged from the darkness, Mercer and his brothers, their faces hard in the fading light. Told you we'd be back, Richardson, Mercer called. Got some business to settle. Samuel stood his ground. There's no business between us, Mercer. Leave now and there won't be trouble. Too late for that, the second brother said. You've been stirring up the Shoshone, telling them they have rights to land that's meant for settlement. They do have rights, Samuel replied evenly. Legal rights granted by treaty, Mercer spat. Treaties with savages don't mean much to real Americans. He dismounted, hand resting on his holstered pistol. We came to deliver a message. Stop interfering, or that pretty Boston lady might find herself a widow before she's even a bride. From inside the cabin, Amelia watched through a crack in the shutters, heart pounding. She had Samuel's spare rifle in her hands, though she had no idea how to use it effectively. Beside her, Elizabeth remained calm, her weathered hands steady as she loaded a shotgun. If he reaches for his gun, run out the back, Elizabeth whispered. Outside, the tension stretched taut as a bowstring. You're threatening a woman now, Mercer? Samuel asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That's low, even for you. Just stating facts, Mercer replied with an ugly smile. Accidents happen, cabins burn, people disappear in wild country. Samuel's hand moved slightly closer to his own weapon. You won't touch them. The moment hung suspended, then erupted into chaos as Mercer went for his gun. Samuel drew faster, but one of the brothers fired from horseback. The shot went wide, splintering wood from the cabin wall. Samuel's shot was more accurate, catching Mercer in the shoulder. The man cursed and stumbled backward. His brothers fired again, forcing Samuel to dive for cover behind a water barrel. Inside the cabin, Amelia made a split-second decision. She threw open the door and leveled the rifle, not aiming to hit anyone but to create distraction. The shot cracked through the air, startling the brothers' horses. One animal reared, throwing its rider. The other bolted, carrying the third brother away into the darkness. Samuel seized the opportunity, emerging from cover to disarm the fallen man while keeping his weapon trained on the wounded Mercer. It's over, Samuel called. Drop your gun, Mercer. Mercer, clutching his bleeding shoulder, glared with pure hatred. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Yes, it is, came a new voice. From the trees emerged several riders, 2 white men wearing Marshall's badges and 4 Shoshone warriors. Marshal Davis, Samuel acknowledged with relief. Good timing. Got your message, the older lawman replied, dismounting. Been tracking these 3 for days. They're wanted for burning homesteads over in Jefferson County. As the marshals took Mercer and his brother into custody, Amelia rushed to Samuel's side. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch," he assured her, though his face was pale with the aftermath of danger. "You were brave but reckless. That rifle could have killed you with its kickback." "I couldn't just watch," she said, trembling now that the danger had passed. Elizabeth emerged from the cabin, shotgun still in hand. She spoke rapidly to the Shoshone warriors, who nodded respectfully. "They will guard the cabin tonight," Samuel translated, "though I doubt we'll see more trouble now that Mercer's been arrested." That night, no one slept much. They sat around the fire, the recent violence making them value the simple comfort of each other's presence. Elizabeth told old stories of the Shoshone not for Amelia's recorder this time, but as a way to restore peace to the disrupted night. In the gray light of dawn, Samuel and Amelia walked by the river. The water flowed serenely, unchanged by the human dramas played out on its banks. "I could have lost you," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "But you didn't," Amelia replied, squeezing his hand. "And now Mercer will face justice for what he's done." "There will be others like him," Samuel warned. "The West is changing. More settlers coming, more pressure on the Shoshone and other tribes." Amelia nodded soberly. "I know, but there are also people working to build understanding between cultures, like you, like what I'm trying to do with my work." Samuel drew her into his arms. "You're remarkable, Amelia Blackett. You came west to record a dying language and ended up fighting to preserve a way of life." "Is that what I'm doing?" she asked, smiling up at him. "Yes," he said seriously. "By valuing the language, you value the people who speak it. That matters more than you know." September brought cooler weather and the sense of impending change. Amelia worked feverishly to complete her recordings and transcriptions. She had amassed an impressive collection: creation stories, historical accounts, songs, everyday conversations, and detailed vocabulary. Elizabeth had proven an inexhaustible source of knowledge, and other Shoshone elders, hearing of her work, had come to contribute their voices to her phonograph. Samuel divided his time between the ranch and the cabin, his presence a constant support as Amelia organized her materials for the return journey to Boston. Neither spoke much about the impending separation, though it hung between them like a shadow. One crisp morning, as golden leaves drifted from the cottonwoods, a letter arrived from Professor Thornwell. He expressed delight at Amelia's progress and confirmed arrangements for her return in October. He also hinted at a possible teaching position at Radcliffe College, a remarkable opportunity for a woman in academia. Amelia read the letter twice, then set it aside with a troubled expression. Samuel, who had brought the mail, watched her reaction closely. "Good news from Boston?" he asked. "Professor Thornwell is pleased with my work," she said, "and there may be a teaching position waiting for me." Samuel nodded, his face carefully neutral. "That's what you wanted, recognition for your work." "It was," Amelia agreed, "before I came here." They sat in silence, the unspoken question of her future hanging between them. Finally, Samuel took her hand. "I won't ask you to give up your career," he said quietly. "I know how hard you've worked, how important your research is." Amelia looked down at their intertwined fingers. "And I won't ask you to leave your home, your ranch, your people. You belong here." "So where does that leave us?" Samuel asked, the pain in his voice evident. Before Amelia could answer, Elizabeth emerged from the cabin. Though she spoke in Shoshone, Amelia understood her words clearly. "The heart knows its home," the old woman said. "Listen to it before you decide." That evening, Amelia walked alone by the river, her thoughts in turmoil. The teaching position at Radcliffe represented everything she had worked for: professional recognition, financial independence, the chance to influence the next generation of linguists. Yet the thought of returning to Boston's crowded streets and social constraints now seemed suffocating. And then there was Samuel. In the short span of a summer, he had become essential to her happiness. The thought of never seeing him again, of reducing their love to letters that would inevitably become less frequent with time, was unbearable. As darkness fell, Amelia reached a decision. She returned to the cabin to find Samuel sitting alone by the fire, Elizabeth having retired early. "I've been thinking," Amelia said, sitting beside him. "So have I," Samuel replied, taking her hand. "You first," Amelia said. Samuel took a deep breath. "I've been considering whether I could split my time, keep the ranch, but spend part of the year in Boston. My foreman could manage things here for months at a time. Amelia stared at him in surprise. You would do that? Leave your home part of the year? For you, yes, Samuel said simply. It wouldn't be ideal, but we could be together. Tears pricked Amelia's eyes at his willingness to compromise. I was thinking along different lines, she said. What if I delivered my materials to Boston, fulfilled my obligation to Professor Thornwell, but then returned here permanently? Now it was Samuel's turn to look surprised. But your career would change, not end, Amelia said firmly. I could continue linguistic work with other tribes in the region. I could write books, correspond with other scholars. And perhaps someday, when Wyoming becomes a state, there might be a university that needs a linguistics professor. You would give up Radcliffe for an uncertain future here? Samuel asked, wonder in his voice. Amelia smiled. I would choose a certain love over an uncertain career. Besides, she added, my work here feels more meaningful than anything I did in Boston. I'm not just studying language in the abstract, I'm helping preserve living cultures. Samuel pulled her close. Are you sure, Amelia? I don't want you to regret your choice. The only thing I would regret is losing you, she said, and sealed her decision with a kiss. The next morning they shared their plans with Elizabeth, who nodded approvingly. I knew from the beginning that you would stay, she told Amelia. Your spirit belongs to this land now. In the following days, Amelia revised her plans. She would return to Boston before winter set in, deliver her materials to the Bureau of Ethnology, and resign her position. She would settle her affairs and return to Wyoming in the spring. I'll go with you, Samuel said as they discussed the journey. Amelia shook her head. You're needed here, especially now that winter is coming. Besides, she added with a smile, I want to shock Professor Thornwell with my decision in person. As the departure date approached, Amelia carefully packed her precious recordings and notebooks. The night before she was to leave, Samuel took her to a special place on his ranch, a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles under the vast star-scattered sky. I wanted to give you this memory to take with you, he said, spreading a blanket on the grass. So you'll remember what's waiting when you return. They lay side by side, gazing up at the Milky Way arching overhead. Samuel pointed out constellations, giving both their English names and the Shoshone stories attached to them. This is the richness I want to preserve, Amelia said. Not just words, but how they connect us to the universe. Samuel turned on his side to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. Amelia, before you go, I want to ask you something. Her heart quickened. Yes, from his pocket, he produced a small object that glinted in the moonlight, a ring with a single pearl set in gold. It was my mother's, he said softly. My father gave it to her as a promise that their two worlds could become one. I'm asking you the same. He took her hand. Amelia Blackett, will you marry me when you return? Joy burst through her like sunrise. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Samuel Richardson, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to her eyes. Under the witnessing stars, they made promises that transcended language. The next morning, Amelia boarded the stagecoach that would begin her long journey east. Samuel stood beside the coach, unwilling to say goodbye until the last possible moment. 5 months, Amelia said. By March, I'll be back. Samuel nodded, his eyes memorizing her face. I'll be waiting. And I'll write every week. As will I, she promised. And when I return, we'll begin our life together. Their final kiss was bittersweet with temporary separation. As the stage pulled away, Amelia kept her eyes on Samuel until he disappeared from view, the pearl ring on her finger a tangible reminder of what awaited her return. Boston welcomed Amelia with familiar sights and sounds, yet she found herself noticing things she had previously taken for granted: how people hurried without looking at each other, how buildings blocked the horizon, how even the air felt confined. Her small apartment seemed cramped after months of vast Wyoming skies. Professor Thornwell was delighted with her materials. Extraordinary work, Miss Blackett, he exclaimed, examining her notebooks and listening to sample recordings. The Bureau will be most impressed. And with the position at Radcliffe all but secured, about that, Amelia interrupted gently. I'm honored by the consideration, but I must decline. The professor stared at her in disbelief. Decline, but my dear girl, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. For someone, yes, Amelia agreed. But I've found my path lies elsewhere. I'm returning to Wyoming in the spring. Wyoming, he repeated, as if she'd said the moon. Whatever for, Amelia smiled, touching the pearl ring she wore on a chain around her neck while in Boston society. To continue my work with native languages in the field. And, she added, to marry. The professor's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. I see, the cowboy you mentioned in your letters, the one who speaks Shoshone. Samuel Richardson, Amelia confirmed. He's actually a rancher and trader, and yes, he speaks Shoshone. He's half-Shoshone himself. To his credit, Professor Thornwell recovered quickly from his surprise. Well, I can't pretend I'm not disappointed to lose you to the frontier, but you've always followed your own compass, Amelia. I respect that. The winter months in Boston passed slowly. Amelia worked with the Bureau to organize her materials, gave several lectures on Shoshone language and culture, and prepared for her permanent move west. Samuel's letters arrived regularly, full of news about the ranch, Elizabeth's health, and his plans for their future. In February, an unexpected opportunity arose. The Smithsonian Institution, impressed by Amelia's work, offered to fund continued research into native languages throughout the Wyoming Territory. It's perfect, Amelia wrote excitedly to Samuel. I can continue my academic work while living where my heart belongs. His reply came swiftly. The house is ready for you. Elizabeth has been teaching Mary how to make your favorite berry bread, and I've worn a path to the mailbox watching for your letters. As March approached, Amelia packed her belongings, keeping only books, research materials, and a few personal treasures. The rest she sold or gave away. Her colleagues organized a farewell gathering where she presented her research on Shoshone language preservation. Some may see my move west as abandoning academia, she told the assembled scholars, but I see it as embracing a more authentic approach to linguistic study. Instead of examining languages as preserved specimens, I'll be documenting living traditions within their cultural context. The journey west seemed shorter than her original trip, perhaps because this time she knew what and who awaited her. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Twin Falls, Samuel was waiting, his face breaking into a smile that warmed her more than the spring sunshine. They were married 2 weeks later in a ceremony that blended traditions. They exchanged vows in English beneath an arbor of spring flowers, then participated in a Shoshone blessing ceremony led by Elizabeth. The celebration that followed brought together people from both communities, ranchers and traders, Shoshone families, even Martha Wilson from the boarding house, who admitted she'd known all along those two would end up together. Life settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Amelia converted a room in the ranch house into an office where she organized her research and wrote articles for linguistic journals. Samuel continued to expand his ranching operation while advocating for Shoshone land rights. Together, they worked to build understanding between the increasingly numerous white settlers and the native communities. Elizabeth stayed in her cabin by the river, but visited often. She and Amelia continued their language work, inviting other tribal elders to record their stories for future generations. The Smithsonian funding allowed Amelia to expand her research to neighboring tribes, creating a comprehensive archive of native languages in the region. You were right, Amelia told Samuel one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the hills with gold. Some words have no translation, like the way I feel when I look at this land, now our land. Samuel smiled, his arm around her shoulders. There's a Shoshone expression for that. It translates roughly as the place where my soul recognizes itself. That's it exactly, Amelia said, resting her head against him. I came west to preserve a language but found a home instead. 2 years after their marriage, Elizabeth many horses passed peacefully in her sleep. In accordance with her wishes, she was buried on a hillside overlooking the river she had lived beside all her life. At the funeral, Samuel spoke in Shoshone, his voice carrying across the valley in words that needed no translation for those who loved her. That same year, Amelia gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth. 2 years later, their son Thomas was born. Both children grew up speaking English and Shoshone with equal fluency, embodying the bridge between cultures that their parents had built. In 1889, Wyoming achieved statehood, bringing new changes to the territory. Amelia was invited to help establish a language department at the new state university, dividing her time between teaching and field research. Her work gained national recognition, challenging prevailing attitudes about native languages and cultures. Samuel's ranch prospered, becoming one of the largest operations in the county. He used his influence to help establish legal protections for Shoshone lands and to ensure that treaties were honored. The trading post became a cultural center where traditional crafts and skills were taught to younger generations. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Amelia sometimes reflected on how differently her life might have unfolded had she not stepped off that stagecoach in Twin Falls so many years before. The path she had chosen wasn't always easy, bridging cultures never was, but it was immeasurably rich in meaning and love. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Samuel gave Amelia a special gift, a journal bound in soft leather, its pages filled with Shoshone words and their meanings, all written in his careful hand. "For the words that have no translation," he explained, "so we never forget them." Amelia turned the pages, recognizing terms they had discussed over the years, concepts unique to Shoshone worldview that English couldn't quite capture. On the final page, Samuel had written a single word followed by its approximate meaning. "The recognition of a soul that has always known yours across time and space." "Is this a real Shoshone word?" Amelia asked, tracing the characters. Samuel smiled. "It's what my grandmother called what happened between us that first summer by the river. She said some connections don't need translation, they just need recognition." Amelia closed the journal and leaned across the table to kiss him, the same spark between them that had first ignited all those years ago. She was right. Some things transcend language entirely. Their legacy continued through their children and grandchildren, through Amelia's extensive archives of native languages that would otherwise have been lost. And through the generations of students, she taught to value different ways of expressing human experience. Samuel's work ensured that many Shoshone families retained their ancestral lands well into the new century, preserving not just territory, but the cultural connection to place that gave meaning to their words. And though the world around them changed dramatically, bringing automobiles and telephones, world wars and women's suffrage, Samuel and Amelia Richardson remained constant in their shared belief that understanding begins with listening, that bridges can be built between different worlds, and that some of life's most profound truths are found in words that have no translation.